Welcome to this fifth installment of HipMojo. I'm your host, Ashkan Karbas-Rushan. CT Moore couldn't be here. Apparently, he got into an agreement with Arianna Huffington, so replacing him today is Dave Strauss. Dave, welcome to the show.
Hey, how you doing?
Pretty good. So today we got a lot to cover. We're going to talk about journalism, transparency, disclosure, and ethics. We're also going to talk about the time-tested debate between content and distribution. And then later on in the last segment of the show, we're going to cover lightning round and email of the week. So let's get right to it. David, what tech blogs do you read when you're at work or when you're at home?
Well, I usually read Ad Age because I'm in advertising. I also read TechCrunch and Media Post.
Okay, so TechCrunch, when AOL bought Michael Arrington's company, what was your expectation? Did you think the editorial and the sort of coverage would stay the same, or did you think things would change?
Well, I think, when you look at an acquisition like that, you can't help but think things are going to change. No matter what happens when a company is acquired, things are always going to change. I do like the fact that TechCrunch has stayed the same in terms of their editorial content, but you can tell that definitely, from an executive level, things have changed from the top down.
Basically, last week when AOL announced that it was going to invest in Michael Arrington's fund, did you think it was a conflict of interest?
Well, absolutely. I mean, Michael Arrington is sort of the head honcho, at TechCrunch. Therefore, he obviously has a say in, what gets discussed and what gets put out there. So, I definitely think there's a conflict of interest there. I mean, what was it, 1 or 2 shows ago, you guys were talking about Ashton Kutcher, and he was writing about, companies that he had invested in without necessarily, disclosing it. Do you think that's sort of the same thing?
Well, I think it's very different because Michael Arrington built TechCrunch because he didn't follow any of the rules of journalism. He basically wrote the rules himself. So I think it was unfair to expect him to act differently after the acquisition. I think the turning point wasn't so much at the onset of the acquisition. Things were going to probably change, you're right, at the business side. I think it's when they bought Huffington Post and made Arianna Huffington head of all content with Michael Arrington reporting to him. A few interesting articles this week. Paul Carr, who writes for TechCrunch, came out and when he, well, you love him or you hate him depending on what he writes, but he's a smart guy and he's very, clever writer. So he basically came out with a bunch of tweets telling Tim Armstrong, CEO, chairman of AOL, to go F off. And Michael Arrington asked him to, expand in an article. And I think what Paul Carr objected to was the fact that even though AOL says that the venture fund is separate from TechCrunch, though AOL is an investor, it still is called Crunch Fund. So this makes it gives the perception that TechCrunch writers are sort of in cahoots. AOL was, bought TechCrunch for a reported $30 million, of which I guess $20 million was guaranteed. $10 million was an earnout. My guess is that once it became clear that Arianna Huffington and Michael Arrington could not really coexist, AOL just said, okay, we can't teach an old dog new tricks and we can't tell Arrington what to do. We'll take that $10 million that was an earnout and we'll just put it in your venture fund, which has $20 million, and we're going to be the biggest one at $10 million. We're the biggest investor. I think the problem, once again, is how Tim Armstrong communicated this. For him to come out and basically say TechCrunch is a different sort of news organization with a different set of rules, I can understand why that would upset everyone. Now, this story is evolving. Michael Arrington is no longer supposedly involved with TechCrunch as a writer. Would you continue reading TechCrunch? Or how does your reading of the site change?
Well, I do enjoy Michael Arrington's articles, but he is not TechCrunch. Although he started it, he doesn't make the blog what it is. It's the fantastic writing, it's the journalism, it's the stories. I go back because I enjoy the writing of the writers. I like their personalities. Since they've launched TechCrunch TV, you get to know a little bit more about the personalities of the writers.
You see how pregnant Sarah is.
Yes, you do see how pregnant Sarah Lacey is. And I read it for the writing. It's still great tech news.
Now, do you see any parallels when Rafat Ali left paid content?
No, I don't see that many parallels.
Because he also left within a year of The Guardian acquiring him, and I think this is the problem with these blog companies that are found around these big personalities. And I think the only time when, Om Malik also started GigaOM, and I think there he probably was the best at transitioning it away from his, sort of cult personality to others. I think when Rafat left, he was very smart to bring on very talented writers. Stacey Kramer's a rock star. David Kaplan's very good. There's a lot of talented people there. I just think the reality is that when you have such a strong personality who has such a strong voice, when that guy leaves, I really enjoy Eric Schoenfeld. I've written, little disclosure here, I've written about a dozen articles for TechCrunch. Eric Schoenfeld has done more to help me become a better writer than a lot of the other editors I've written for. But I just think there's a loss that I'm not sure what TechCrunch is going to be. Okay, quick question before we move on to segment 2. Do you think that journalists should remain on the sidelines, or do you think times have changed and journalists can get involved by, investing in companies or whatever?
I mean, there's nothing wrong with journalists investing in companies. It's when they start writing about those companies favorably, even with disclosure, there's a certain level of trust with the reader that gets lost there when we know that the writer, the journalist, has something at stake.
You're so old school. I think that there's an element of envy and jealousy from a lot of the traditional hardcore journalists to see a guy like Michael Arrington, who was basically a lawyer turned entrepreneur, launch a site, become so influential, and get to basically live by his own rules. So I think really here this is more of a story of jealousy, envy, while no one's going to come out and say it, put on the facade of, oh my God, integrity, ethics, and whatnot. And I think because of the animosity between the Huffington Post, which basically is the parent of TechCrunch now, a subsidiary of AOL, and the New York Times, when the New York Times comes out and writes saying, oh my God, this is so unethical, I think this has spilled over more into HuffPo and New York Times. And it's a shame, but I think TechCrunch will go on, it'll be fine. It's time to take a break. We're going to come back, segment 2. We're going to talk about content versus distribution.